Good evening, friends. I would like to throw some light on the Economic Survey of India, and we are going to discuss certain highlights what has been mentioned. The Economic Survey of India is released by the Ministry of Economic Affairs. It's presented 2 to 3 days before the budget, and primarily it lays down the past performance in the last year and the future roadmap for the economy. So whatever the country has done economically, it mentions the same. In one way, we can say in simple words that it is a report card of whatever we have done, and also the roadmap of what is going to happen in the next year or in the budget. It also mentions and analyzes the essential statistics of the country, and which are very vital for understanding what has been happening. So the key highlights are mentioned as under, and I'm going to discuss one by one. It starts with the Sanskrit shlok, which is mentioned in Rig Ved, Tamsoma Jyotirgamaya, which says that from darkness to light. It draws a similarity from India's series in Australia, from all out on 36 runs to a series win. India has similarly shown a V-shaped recovery in the economy, and from a negative 23.9% growth in the first quarter of 2021, the RBI and the government is projecting a growth of minus 7.1% in Q3, Q4. And it is also expected that the next 2 years, India's growth is going to be in the range of around 11%. And similarly, IMF has also projected the same. So it is very heartening to note that India is going to grow at a scorching pace. So the economic survey has been divided into 10 chapters, and we are going to understand briefly what all these chapters are all about. So chapter 1. So it primarily talks about the corona crisis management and how India has focused on life as well as livelihood. Both of these things are important to save lives and to save livelihoods. And the strict lockdown has paid decent dividends, and the spread of this virus and this pandemic has been controlled to a great extent in India. And we have seen, the capital Delhi and places like Bombay, where hospitals were full and people were infected, in every street, every home. Now the numbers have come down drastically, and India has kind of achieved a herd immunity, and India has done well in handling this pandemic. And in one way, we can say that we have come victoriously out of it. The government took cues from the Spanish flu, the three waves of the Spanish flu, and that's how they such a very strict lockdown, and people were not allowed to come out of their homes, or any commercial activity was stopped. So primarily, it is a great victory for India the way we have come out in the last 9 to 10 months out of this. Chapter 2, it primarily asks a very pertinent question, that does growth lead to debt sustainability? Answer is yes, but it's not vice versa. So we have to understand what exactly this is. So the roadmap is towards sustainable debt and sustainable growth and sustainable debt to GDP ratio. In the last 25 years, India's GDP growth rate is greater than the interest rate we have been paying. We have been net borrowers from the IMF and other international agencies, and the debt which has been paid by the government, our growth rate has been much higher than that. So the debt paying capacity has been much better of India Inc. than other developed countries. So, if at all we take an example of Japan, this is supposedly a very advanced economy. The Japanese debt to GDP ratio is 444.4, while India's debt to GDP ratio is 122.9. And if we split this 122.9, the external debt is 68.1%, and the internal debt is 54.9%. Now we have to understand what is external and internal debt. External debt is when we borrow from outside, and the internal debt we can manage by printing money. So this is easily being handled, and I think that India is in a better situation to handle the debt crisis, where most of the advanced economies in Europe or in Japan, these countries are reeling under great pressure of debt. Chapter 3, it talks about the India's sovereign rating, and does it really depict the actual fundamental state of affairs in India? So fundamentals are quite different from what we see as the rating given by international companies like Moody's or S&P. India stands at the triple B minus or Baa3 and this is looked upon by the world. But again, I think that if we consider the India's debt paying capacity and we analyze what has been happening on the parameters which are laid down by the debt rating companies, the credit rating companies, India's debt to GDP ratio is very good. The growth rate has been fantastic. The inflation has been kept under the thumb, and it's not troubling at all. The political stability has not been in question the last 6 7 years. The rule of law has been improving by the day in our country. So all these parameters, and on all these parameters, India has been doing well. So I think the economic survey wants to convey to the world that India has been rated by the credit rating agencies, which is not commensurate with the actual thing on the ground. And if at all we see an improvement, looking at all the parameters, we will see an increased FII and FDI inflow in the country, which can lead to further growth. So this low rating has been a deterrent, I would say, and I think that if at all the world focuses and India Inc. focuses on stabilizing the credit rating, there could be much higher inflows and much higher foreign investments in India. Chapter 4, it primarily focuses on inequality and growth. There are conflicts and there are conversions. So if we look into the details, it talks about focusing on ethical wealth creation. Now, growth has to happen with equally, and there is a lot of inequality, and socio-economic outcomes have been not commensurate with in the past years. But if we look at India's report card in the last 5 7 years, India has been, if we compare ourselves with the advanced economies, India has been doing really well. The first example could be the health outcomes. We have positively come out of this pandemic, and we see a lot of inequality in the per capita income across Indian states. In the advanced economies, there is a negative correlation. In India, we have seen some very good growth in some of the states like Maharashtra, Gujarat, even Punjab, where the growth rate has been very good. Delhi, the GDP growth rate has been good. Similarly, in the education index, in the infant mortality space, in the crime rates, India has done much better than the advanced economies in the last 5 years. And the probability of bringing out of poverty is much higher in India. Increasing the per capita income is much higher in India as compared to the developed economies. Chapter 5, it primarily focuses on the healthcare, and it says that the healthcare finally takes the center stage. Due to this pandemic, I think that it is a blessing in disguise or a boon, wherein government of India has finally started thinking about focusing on healthcare. Now, the healthcare spend has, is being planned to increase from 1% to 2.5 to 3%. This would lay focus on rural health and last mile, taking the health and healthcare to the last mile and to the rural masses of the country. And the planned expenditure is much higher. And it also focuses on bringing the health insurance premiums into a very into a gamut where people can afford. The affordability and accessibility of health insurance schemes has to be increased, and this is also being focused in chapter 5. In chapter 6, it talks about the process of reforms and enabling decision making under regulation and under regulations. Now, regulations and supervisions, these are two different things. Now, our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, said that there should be minimum government and maximum governance. So this chapter primarily talks about increasing our focus on governance, and the government's intervention in the day-to-day affairs of the economy and the country should be minimum. So this would also happen on the business side, while the government plans a lot of disinvestment, and government has no business to be in business, as Mr. Piyush Goyal said. So the government plans to divest a lot of their stakes in the companies and to increase, to decrease their the deficit. This is very important and imperative. Now, Chapter 7, it primarily mentions about the loan moratorium, which has been extended by banks to a lot of businesses. It was very important as, there was a lot of uncertainty which surrounded the businesses due to the pandemic. And practically for about 4 to 6 months, the businesses were not allowed to function, and there was a lot of debt which was piled on the books of the companies. So they were given time to pay back the debts, as there was no business at all, and this has primarily kind of paid off, and the economy is slowly coming on track. The people and the businesses have started paying back their debt. The people who have paid their debts dutifully have been also incentivized by the government, which is also a very welcome step. So I think that over a period of time we would be able to tide off the vagaries of the pandemic, and due to which there has been, the business has been hampered big time. But a V-shaped recovery, which we are seeing, would help the businesses to come out. Although banks could be in stress, the things on the wall are a bit different than, they might be a bit different. We might see some stress in the books of the banks for some time, but they would eventually come out with the help of the government. Chapter 8 focuses on innovation, because if you see globally, the private sector contributes a lot towards the innovation part. And presently, we see 37% of the spends of the private sector towards R&D, while in the advanced countries we see 68%. So there's a huge differential, almost double of what companies spend towards R&D. Now the government is focusing on its, on the government and both the private side. They want to innovate and want companies to innovate and spend on R&D, so that we might become an innovation hub for the world. India also plans to become a hub for the defense export. So I think that it's going to pay off, whether it's IT or defense or other sectors. India has to focus on R&D, and this is what the Chapter 8 also talks about. So the expenditure would be increased from 0.7% to 2% in the budget for research and development, which is also a very, very welcome step. In Chapter 9, it talks about Ayushman Bharat, Jan Yojana, and health outcomes. So the outcome of the Ayushman Bharat scheme, which was launched in 2018, has been very profound and positive. We have seen that certain states which adopted Ayushman Bharat, they have shown very good health indicators. Infant mortality has come down, the death rates have come down, the spread of various communicable diseases have come down. So Ayushman Bharat scheme has done well. So again, if we have a healthy country, we'll have a healthy economy. So this chapter primarily talks about how we can infuse health in the country as well as the economy. And Chapter 10, the final chapter, it talks about the basic necessities like housing, water, sanitation, electricity, clean cooking fuel. These are some of the important parameters of having a good quality life. And the government is trying full time to make it accessible to all. There have been various schemes which have been run in the last 5 to 7 years, like Housing for All, Pradhan Mantri Jan Awas Yojana. So it talks about affordable housing for the masses, for the poor. Har Ghar Jal Abhiyan. This means that the people need to have clean drinking water. Every home should have clean drinking water. Sanitization, which comes under the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So government is working very hard and working on making the country clean. And electrification to the last mile. So rural electrification is something which the government is still going to focus on, and electrification has to happen to each and every village, each and every house of the country. And finally, cooking gas for all. So the Prime Minister took this initiative that towards the women health, and women use chulas and other means to cook, which creates a havoc to their health. So clean cooking gas, the accessibility of clean cooking gas should also be made available to the masses. So if you look at the last 5 to 7 years, government has also worked very hard towards achieving all these targets. I think the economic survey is fairly balanced, and it focuses on the right points. And if India is able to come out completely out of this pandemic, and if it grows at 11%, I think that we are going to be probably one of the very few economies in the world which are going to do well. And finally, we are going to head into budget tomorrow morning, and I hope and wish the finance minister all the very best, and the country all the very best, and all our stock market participants. And it is our wish list that the budget should be conducive, and should be pleasant for the market participants, and we all should be partakers, and the India growth story. Thank you very much.